Hey, it's Mark Zimmerman, Chief Operating Officer, Renters Warehouse Houston. I am so happy that you decided to click and listen to what we have to talk about today. We're going to be talking about renting to residents with pets. On a side note, we are a residential property leasing and property management company here in the greater Houston area. We would love to help find you a tenant. We would love to help manage your property, but let's get right into it. So this presentation, we've given it a bunch. We call it Sit, Stay, What You Should Know About Renting to Pet Owners. Very important. So let's get right into this real quickly. So one thing that you should know as a landlord, Americans are obsessed with their pets. I'm going to hit you with some data. In 2020, the APPA says that we spent almost 104 billion with a B, dollars on our pets. 104 billion. I would say that we're obsessed. The Humane Society in 2020 said that 72% of renters had pets in 2020. 72%. That's like 3/4 almost. That's also crazy. And then also know that tenants that have pets often will pay more in rent, good thing for us landlords, and they'll stay in a property they don't even really like just to have to not move because they're in a place that accepts their pet. So those are really, I think, some good reasons why you might want to think about renting to tenants with pets. We're going to go into this in more detail. And lastly, this is pretty obvious from what I just said, refusing to rent to tenants that have pets may just eliminate a huge pool of renters for you. So let's dig into this a little deeper. So people usually think, okay, there's got to be pros and there's got to be cons about renting to somebody that has a pet. Absolutely true. So let's talk about some of the common ones. So, some of the pros, you definitely have a potential to get higher rent. We're going to talk about all this in a little more detail in a second. You're going to find that they stay longer. You're going to find that you have lower vacancy rates when you open it up to people that have pets. And you'll have a larger pool to draw from. Now, on the con side, yes, people are concerned about property damage, increased property damage because of the pet. They're worried about increased liability. They're worried about increased insurance costs. They're worried about risk of injury on the property to the resident or maybe to a neighbor, to a mailman. That's a whole nother story. Or maybe they're worried about potential complaints from the neighbors. And those are all valid, things to think about when you think about what negative connotations there could be to renting to somebody that has pets. So let's talk about the pros, okay? And I'm gonna hit you with data again because I love data. The numbers do not lie. Number one, there absolutely is a solid potential to get higher rent from a tenant that has pets. In fact, there's a study done by Firepaw, and they said that there was a 20 to 30% rental premium associated with renting to residents that have pets. 20 to 30% higher rent is basically what they're saying. That's crazy. That's a little bit more money there. Not a bad thing. We talked about tenancies, longer tenancies. Well, guess what? That same study found that a resident with a pet stays on average about 46 months. That's right. That's about 4 years, right? In the property. Well, on average, a resident with no pets stays about 18 months, about a year and a half. So we're talking 4.5 years, about 4 years almost, compared to a year and a half. Now, most of us landlords know that the longer the tenant stays in the property, the more yield we make, the more money we make. And why is that? I don't have to do make-ready turns. I don't have to have vacancy costs while I'm trying to find another tenant. I don't have to pay another listing fee to the person that's going to help me find the tenant. So there's all these different reasons why you want to keep your tenant in the property. So we're talking 4 years versus a year and a half. There's a big reason right there. There are lower vacancy rates, right? In fact, that same study said that vacancy was significantly, their word not mine, lower at 10% vacancy for tenants that have pets. And homes rented much faster, 35% faster, that study found, 35% faster. I mean, it takes a third of the time to find a new tenant when you got to find a tenant because you're opening it up to pets. Fantastic. And then lastly, they said that you'll also have a larger tenant pool. A property that say pets are okay, twice as many applicants, 2 times as many applicants. That's crazy. So I think there's a lot of reasons there to go ahead and go down that road with renting to someone that has a pet. Now, cons, there's property damage, right? You're worried about scratched doors and chewed floors and urine smells. Well, guess what? That's a fact, but just factor in those costs. That's why you charge a little bit more higher rent. That's why you get a higher pet deposit or pet fee. Yes, increased liability can be a problem. Just know that yes, most states hold the dog owner responsible for something that happens, but landlords sometimes can be put on the hook as well. So that can happen. Insurance costs may go up. One study also found that on average, you might pay about $150 more in your annual premium for your insurance on your house if it covers tenants' pets. That works out to be about 10, 12 bucks a day. Not a huge amount, but it might happen. But definitely check with your insurance provider and see how you might be able to offset that liability with a little higher rent. Risk of physical injury, that's absolutely true. That can happen, but just know that size restrictions can help, smaller dogs instead of bigger dogs. But temperament's really the big thing. Little Chihuahuas can be mean and tear your leg off, and you have a big German Shepherd that's just a little sweet, sweet, docile baby dog. So, not necessarily size, but more so temperament. And then lastly, neighbor complaints. Yes, that's possible, but this fire pause study found that only about a third of the landlords that they polled said that they had noise problems. So a third had noise problems, still not a huge deal. So now let's talk about how you can minimize the risk and some of those concerns. We talked about a little bit as we went through that list of cons. One, you can raise the security deposit, not a problem. You can charge a pet fee or a pet deposit. We certainly do. You can outline what kind of pets are allowed in your rental property, or use case by case, pets on a case by case basis. I prefer that over no pets, case by case, and I'll give you a story. My mom has a little dog named Sadie. Sadie's 20 pounds, 25 pounds. It's the ugliest, cutest dog you'll ever meet. It's like half pug, half Dalmatian, ugly dog, but super cute dog. My mom, who's in her 70s, is devoted to that dog. That dog lives better than most of us. That dog has my old bedroom in our house, and it's Sadie's room, little steps going up to my old bed. She's going to take care of your house, and she's going to take care of her dog. You want her as a resident in your property. But if you advertise your property for rent, put no pets, she's not going to come and apply, and you're going to miss out on Susie and Sadie coming in and being a tremendously fantastic renter in your property. So that's kind of an example of where case by case will allow you to bring in Sadie, but then when somebody else comes in with 3 pit bulls, you can say no. So that kind of gives you some flexibility. So always use case by case under the pets portion on your listing. Next thing, you can always ask the previous landlord, did you have any problems with the pet? You call that previous landlord to ask about how the tenant was. Maybe you ought to ask about the tenant's pet too. Because the tenant may be great, but they may be like, man, that dog's like Cujo. You do not want to rent that dog. So ask the previous landlord if they had any problems. Next, you can always ask the resident, has your pet have any formal obedience training? A lot of times you go to PetSmart and you get the training done. They'll give you a little certificate. Those are great. And so some residents will have those, and that can be a big on the plus column about maybe going ahead and renting to that resident that has a pet. Always make sure that the tenant fills out the pet information area on your lease, what's allowed at least. Like in our lease, we want name of the pet, we want the age, we want the breed, and we want the weight. And you need that for each pet, and make sure you put that on the lease. That way the tenant's telling you exactly who is coming into their property, what pets are bringing in, and a description of each. We also ask for a picture of the pet. Just do a selfie with your pet. Pet owners love doing that, but guess what? Now you have a picture of Fido as well, right? That's very important. And then lastly, on the day that you're moving them into the property, you want to take your lease and look at the pet info that they wrote down and validate that the pet that they described, the pet that they sent you a selfie of, hopefully matches with what you're looking at as they're moving in. I mean, you don't want to be like, hey, that's Damien the pit bull, but you described Fluffy the poodle here in the lease. That is not going to fly. So you want to make that verification. Very, very important. So just think about that. Those are some ways that you can maybe minimize risk and your concerns as far as renting to residents with pets. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to talk about service animals. This is a very, very, very hot topic, especially when you're renting to pets. But guess what? Here's the bottom line. According to the Fair Housing Act, according to HUD, according to ADA, assistant animals are not considered pets. You cannot use a no pet policy to deny housing to anyone that has an assistant animal. So just take that off the table. Now, I want you to know something. 60% of complaints that the HUD gets, Housing of Urban Development, 60% of complaints that they get are about assistance animals. So this is a big deal. So you want to make sure that you follow the law to the letter and do what you're supposed to do. So I'll give you some tips. First of all, January the 28th of last year, 2020, HUD issued a new assistance animal notice. It'd been, I think, 7 years since they've done that. The last one was in 2013, I think. So they updated after 7 years. And guess what? Now they have what they call assistance animals. And two subcategories under assistance animals are service animals and support animals. Now, service animals are those service dogs. And guess what? The new notice that they released, HUD released, says specifically that service animals are only dogs. So you can't be walking around with your lizard or something. Service animals to help you with your disability. On the service side, truly service animals are only dogs. That one's easy, right? Now, breed of dog doesn't matter. It's just dogs is what it says. Now, support animals. Now, these are the emotional support animals, right? You always hear about. They also define that as well, which is great. Domesticated animals that are traditionally kept in the home for pleasure. So that's dogs, that's cats, that's birds, that's rabbits, that's hamsters, that's gerbils, that's other rodents, that's fish, yes, fish. That's turtles, which interestingly enough, turtles are the only reptile included, and other small domesticated animals, right? So that is what encompasses possible types of support animals. Now, reptiles, barnyard animals, monkeys, kangaroos, and anything that's not traditionally domesticated are not considered common household animals, so they can't be considered a support animal, okay? Another thing you need to know, you got 10 days basically to respond to an animal assistance request from the resident. So they say, hey, I've got this assistance animal. You got 10 days to do your due diligence and respond back. Now, everybody's seen those certificates that people are getting off the internet that says it's a certified assistance animal. Those really don't mean much, and they are not enough on their own. If a resident sends you one of those, you can look at it and just throw it in the trash, because that's not really what you need. What you need is a letter from the doctor saying that they need this animal, this support animal, okay? Now, you can ask for the letter from the doctor and require that from your potential resident, but you can't ask what it's for. Now, the letter will verify the need and maybe even mention the need that they're helping with, but you can't get any details in it. Basically, just get the letter and then move on from there. Next, if they say they have two assistance animals, which will happen, they need to have two separate letters that are separate and distinct. It can't be just a carbon copy with a name change. And you can ask the doctor about that. They have to be two separate, distinct letters for each pet. That's okay. Now, you can only confirm the validity of the letter with the doctor. You can't ask details. What's going on? What's wrong with him? You can only say, did you issue a letter mentioning the need for a assistance animal or a support animal for this resident? Is it valid? And they're either going to say yes or no. And those are really the only things that you want to ask the doctor anyway, is yes and no questions. So hopefully that's clear. It's a touchy situation, but just know there are those rules that are involved. So in conclusion, right, let's hit some of the high points. One, to rent to pet owners or to not rent to pet owners, that is indeed the question. I'm quoting somebody there. In my opinion, I think there's a lot more arguments to rent to tenants with pets than to say no pet policy. I really do, and I think we just discussed one. More money is the big one. Longer tenancies, less vacancies, more money, a lot of good reasons. Remember that assistance animals are not pets, so they're off the table. You can't charge a pet deposit for them. You can't deny someone because they have an assistance animal, so that's off the table. Do your research ahead of time, and use your suggestions. Use the suggestions that I gave you to kind of mitigate your risk when it calls with pets, talking about insurance liabilities and such. But just think about this, and I have stories after stories after stories I can share with you as being a landlord myself, that sometimes tenants will do just as much damage, if not more, that don't have pets than a tenant that does damage that has a pet. And that is the truth. Make sure that you have an airtight tenant placement process, right? So that way you're screening the tenants correctly. Or what you can do is you can hire a property management company to do this for you. And I think I know of one that's pretty good that would love to help you out, with this process. And then I just will leave you with this. Careful assessment is the key to reducing the chance of damage, and this is not just for damage from pets, but also damage from humans. Careful assessment is the key to reducing damage. So I hope this was of some use to you. I hope you gained some insight. As always, you can always go to renterswarehouse.com, click on our location, send us an email. I'll answer any questions that I possibly can. But I absolutely, again, just wish you well in your journey as a landlord and bringing in tenants, probably with pets, it sounds like. And I just hope you have a great day. Mark Zimmerman, Chief Operating Officer, Renters Warehouse. I'm out.